What is up, everyone? I've got a new episode of 10-minute poker tips, and I'm going to go over a couple of hands on my recent win. Luckily, I was able to ship a tournament very early in 2025 and was actually for this horsey trophy you see up here, which is the LAPC Remington. I've been trying to get one of these for years, and it's been this running joke that I can't get one when everyone else has one. No choice for studying these days, or it's been for quite some time, has been GTO Wizard. I do think it's the best tool out in the market, at least in the web-based solvers. If you'd like to try GTO Wizard for yourselves, you can get 10% off with my referral code. That's down in the description. You can just go right to the URL. You do need to sign up for a free account first before you see the package options, and then you can just pick one, and after that, your 10% code will be applied. Definitely check it out. So obviously, there were a couple of interesting hands that I wanted to go over, so let's just jump right into it. So first, let's just go over some of the payouts. It's already up on Hendon Mob, so you could see it was 34,800 for first, so about 10K gap between first and second, around 9K gap between second and third, all the way down to ninth place, which is 3480. So you can see this is a pretty top-heavy playout structure, which is pretty common. I think in LA, a lot of the tournaments tend to be a little bit more top-heavy. So in these cases, obviously, we are maybe a little bit ICM sensitive on jumps, not completely ignorant of ICM, but a little bit less sensitive on the jumps, and definitely trying to play for first without being irresponsible. Okay, so first hand, 2 tables left, 8-handed, and it folds to me all the way over here on the button. I have 50 big blinds and a player in the big blind with about 20 bigs who's actually like quite aggressive, probably like in an over aggressive way with all ins. He really tends to just take not exactly any 2 cards, but can take some garbage cards and just pile it in for a whole ton of chips, and he just obviously doesn't give a shit. Now we're down to 2 tables, or even now to a final table, he's just gonna pile it in. So you got to make a decision here if you're gonna gamble with this guy or not. I have ace-8 off and I raise, small blind folds, and as predicted, he just jams. I'd already kind of mentally, in my mind had decided this is going to be a call, but let's just double check that. So let's just say big blind goes all in, and now the button's decision here, an ace-8 off is a call, but it is the cutoff. And I think this is an important thing to do when you're playing around with solvers, is just know where the cutoffs are and the thresholds are. Like ace-7 off is a fold, ace-8 off is a call, ace-6 suited is where you start folding the suited aces, and you can see this all the way down to even the ace-3, ace-4, ace-5, which are sometimes nice to jam. You're not calling those off after so many jams on you. You are folding king-9 suited, king-jack off, queen-jack off. All these things kind of make sense. Surprisingly, you are calling most of 4-4. I would think that maybe 4-4 is a fold, but obviously 3's become absolutely a fold. But it's always interesting to make sure that you're kind of double checking where you think you should be folding and then what a solver is sort of telling you to do. But in this case, though, if we had to go back and look at the big blind, what are they supposed to be jamming? So they are jamming all these small pairs down to deuces, up to 10s, and then when you start hitting the premiums is where you start raising, not all in. You can see, though, that you're not actually jamming most of your low suited aces, you're just calling them, but you are jamming most of your unsuited aces, right? And just the ace-6 off and ace-3 off are the 2 that you kind of pick to more call than raise. And then all the unsuited kings, even most of the suited kings, you can see with 20 big blinds, you really shouldn't be piling it in there with this much of your range, right? You should be calling almost half of your range and only, raising or going all in with roughly 20%. So interestingly, this player is doing way less calling and way more jamming. And I don't know exactly the number, but it could be that he's jamming 35% of his range, right? Like that's actually how aggressive he is. This probably makes it so that you might be calling it with the ace-7 off, king-jack offs, king-9 suited, start kind of making it in there because his jamming range is so much wider. But then you also have to make a decision, because I thought that I had quite a skill edge over the rest of the field. There were a couple of really good players left, right, that I don't think I was like that much better than, but most of the field that I was better than. So I have to also make a decision here. Do I really want to risk, 20 out of my 50 big blinds on what could potentially be like a flip with this player, right? And also I've seen him get lucky in huge pots, getting in really bad. So I also have to take in the getting a bad run good that this player has. It is a choice that you have to make. You don't always have to follow solvers. If you do think you have a skill edge, you might want to throw away the ace-8 off and the ace-9 off and the ace-7 suited and not take that risk, and then just hold on to that 50 BB, which is a really nice stack to kind of control the table and, probably even the final table if I can keep it up around that range. Did decide to call it off with the ace-8 off. He ended up having king-9 offsuit, wild hand. So you can see here with king-9 offsuit, that should just be a clear call. And I think even up to king-jack off is even thinking about a raise yet. He flopped a 9, I flopped an ace, so he was already pretty dominated there, but then he ended up rivering a king, which then cost me, like 20 BBs out of my 50 BB stack. It didn't put me in like danger zone, but it definitely put me back into sort of an awkward stack size. But those are the risks that we kind of have to take, but I think, the hand was played fine. Now the next hand, now this is at the final table. We are down to 7 players, and it folds to me in the small blind, and I have roughly 40 bigs, and the big blind has somewhere around like 10 to 15 big blinds. So what should the small blind be doing here? And I think that this was also a pretty trivial decision for me. I had jack deuce suited and I just went for the jam. I didn't really think that this would be anything other than a jam from the small blind. But it's always interesting to take a look at all the other hands that make it as a jam. And you might be surprised to see what this looks like, right? So even at a final table, even when you could be, losing roughly 40% of your stack on spewy, stuff it in there, you are jamming 8 deuce suited and 9 deuce suited. Jack 5 off and queen 4 off and king 3 off, down to 7 5 off, 5 4 off. So definitely important to make sure that you are, especially in these deep final table, big stack versus the little stack situations, truly understanding what ranges and what hands are profitable to do what with. You can see you're folding a very, very small percentage of hands. It's like absolutely the pure garbage that you're actually folding, but there's almost no calling here. It's 0.8% call, right? So it's either going to be a raiser and all in, and then your raises are obviously a huge cluster of these premiums, all the way down to 7s, and then along with some of the garbage, right? So that just gives you a little bit of balance. When you raise not all in, it's not always premiums, it's not always shit. It's going to be a little bit of a balance of both. She woke up with ace jack, but I flopped the deuce and I got super lucky and busted her from the tournament, and then, continued on my way building a pretty big stack here at the final table. But it's important to always make sure that you are making the right decisions here. Next hand, again, down to the final table. We have now 6 people left, and it's a very similar situation as the last one. It folds to me all the way to my small blind. I have, again, about roughly 40 bigs, and the player in the big blind is a very good player who had somewhere around like 10 to 12 BBs. What are we doing here with 8-5 offsuit? So this one, I was not actually sure about what to do. And you can see here, I was right? 8-5 offsuit looks like it's a mix, but then it's actually a raise, not all in. It's one of the garbage hands that make it into the raise, not all in bucket. All in, let's take a look at the specific all in. All in is 18% of the time, raise is 75% of the time, and call is 7% of the time. So when you see percentages like this, typically, even if the EVs might be a little bit close, 75% is mostly telling you to raise not all in. I did decide to go for the jam here with the 8-5 off. So even though it's in the mix, I would say that probably wasn't the correct decision. I probably should have raised not all in and maybe just folded to a jam. He did call with kings, and this time I did not get lucky and ended up, losing a chunk of my stack that actually did put me back down to, again, not a danger zone, but again, a little bit of an awkward stack, especially with a big stack at the table. Regardless of what the result is, we always have to make sure that we are just making the right decision with the hand that we have. And in this case, 8-5 offsuit. It wasn't a huge mistake to jam, but definitely a little bit of a mistake to jam here. Lastly, now this was 3 people left, and this was a big, big hand. Also thought that this was not a very controversial decision, but I was curious about what I should be doing, with the edges of my range. So the situation was 3 people left. I had 15 big blinds on the button. There was a big stack in the small blind with roughly 40 bigs, and then the big blind actually had somewhere around like 6 to 8 BBs, so she was very short. So, in these situations where you're putting your stack at risk when there is a short stack, and as we said a little bit earlier with the payouts, we're looking at almost a 10K difference between second and third. This is a pretty big decision to make here. So I had pocket 9s, and this was just easy stuff for me. I didn't think anything of it. And you can see here, this is, 100% all in. So this is a clear stuff, even with the dynamics of there being a big stack in the small blind left to act behind me, but then the short stack in the big blind who could basically just, get out of the way and hope that she gets a pay jump. But let's take a look at what else you should be raising versus calling versus jamming. You can see that you're actually folding ace 7 off down, right, from the button. So this is actually how tight you have to be in a situation like this. You are folding ace deuce suited, you are folding king 8 suited, jack 9 suited, queen jack off, queen 10 off, king 10 off. These are all jack 10 off. These are all typically slam dunk raises from the button, but because of that situation here, because that small blind can put you in a world of hurt, you are being pretty tight on your button raise here. But the 9-9 was a clear jam. He ended up calling, which, I wasn't terribly upset about. I think that I needed to basically build a stack to sort of compete if we got heads up. He flipped over ace 10, so we were just in a flip situation. Big blind folded. I'm sure she was like doing backflips on the inside. Luckily, I won this flip, and I was able to, double up to 30 BBs, put him down to, close to my range, and then we had, basically a pretty good heads up where I was able to pull it off and pull off the win. So that was very, very fortunate. Super fun tournament. I'm glad to finally, ship my Remington. Hopefully these hands were useful to you, just because, you won a tournament or all these hands kind of went your way. It's it's always good to try to remember some of the hands that, you know, even the decision that you were sure of, right? Just ask yourself, well, what would I do here with this other hand? What would I do with Jack 10 off here? What would I do with like 7-5 suited here? And if you're not sure, it's always good to run these sims inside GTO Wizard. Obviously, don't do it at the card room or the casino. Do it when you get home. And then just run it back and kind of take a look so that you learn a little bit and extrapolate a little bit. And I think real life situations where I'm evaluating kind of helps me remember things a little bit better. So anyways, I hope these hands were as interesting for you as they were for me. I'm going to have lots and lots of great guests coming on soon. Continue to do a few of these by myself, you know, here and there when I have some interesting stuff to talk about. If you like this content, please subscribe, give the video a like, and please tune in for more awesome content on 10-minute poker tips. Thanks everyone for watching.